excited today about our guest speaker. Our keynote speaker today knows the best medicine isn't always found in a pill bottle. Sometimes it's found in a song, a garden, or a community. Professor Genevieve Dingle is a clinical psychologist at the University of Queensland and affiliate professor at Nottingham Trent University in the UK. Her work is reshaping how we think about mental health, moving beyond the clinical and into the creative, the social, and the everyday. Genevieve is a key voice in the Australian Social Prescribing Institute of Research and Education, ASPIRE. She is championing the importance of the social determinants of health and the transformative power of social prescribing, from the value of community choirs to the role of urban design. All factors in creating flourishing, livable, sustainable communities. Genevieve's message is clear. We must reconnect people to their communities and activate and design communities that help people to flourish. I hope that's correct. Genevieve has led major ARC-funded trials on loneliness and social isolation. She's chair of the Arts and Culture on Prescription panel at ASPIRE and is associate editor of the Journal of Psychology of Music. Her research is bringing rigorous science to the spaces where community and wellbeing meet. So today, in implementing and evaluating social prescribing in regional and rural areas of Queensland, Genevieve will take us inside two major Queensland trials. She'll share real-world challenges and wins of getting social prescribing to work on the ground across diverse communities and in interdisciplinary teams. So please join me in welcoming Professor Genevieve Dingle.
Yeah, am I in the right place?
You are.
I go here. Okay.
Exactly.
Thank you so much for the invitation and the warm introduction. I feel like I'm amongst my people here. Probably should just say a little bit about my background. So I grew up in Gatton, if you know it, Lockie Valley. So I'm a rural kid myself. And I'm public school educated. I'm very interested in student equity and student wellbeing. So I could have probably done a completely different talk about my digital student wellbeing work, but here we are. So lovely to have this opportunity to share a little bit of some of the things that I've been working on. Also probably important to say that I'm a clinical psychologist by training, and I have worked for over a decade in sort of hospital and health traditional psychology roles. But my background is both science and arts. I've got a science degree and arts degree, and I find that the most exciting work happens when you bring those things together. And you're talking to an interdisciplinary project team or audience like yourself. So I've sort of swayed quite a long way across from my traditional training into some of the work that I'm doing now. So I'm pointing at you when
I'm the one.
Yeah, thank you. So I did also want to echo the earlier acknowledgement of country. So I also live and work on, in Meanjin, and so I'd like to, on behalf of the University of Queensland, pay my respects to the traditional custodians and their elders past and present. So that was that one. This is our reconciliation artwork for the University of Queensland, which I really love. All right, so a bit of an overview of this session. First of all, I'm going to talk about unmet social needs and why they're really important for us to talk about in terms of the knock-on effects on health and wellbeing. Secondly, I'll introduce this idea of social prescribing, which is still quite new to most people. So some definitions and some working models of social prescribing. Then we'll look a little bit about the evidence. So I'll share mainly the results from Brisbane North Primary Health Network trial, which is quite regional, big regional area to the north of Brisbane. But I'll also touch on the current Queensland-wide trial that's in 10 sites across everywhere in Queensland, rural, remote, and also some metropolitan sites. And then I'll talk about some learnings, some challenges and successes that are coming out of that last 6 or 7 years of work there. Okay, so I wanted to start by sort of focusing on this fact, which is that the top 10% of GP appointments, attenders are being taken up 30 to 50% of appointments. So these are known as the frequent attenders. So what's happening here is that there's they often do have quite complicated health and mental health needs, but they're attending a lot of times not to get more medical care. They're attending because they have to be seen. They often can be bulk billed, and it's someone that is listening to them. So we're talking about unmet social needs. Sorry. Okay, and so thinking about unmet social needs in one or more of those social determinants of health domains, which I know I'm not speaking to anyone who doesn't know this stuff. This is a nice infographic from the Australian Institute for Health and Wellbeing. You're talking about people who have potentially underemployment or unemployment. They've got low incomes. They've got maybe unstable housing. They may be in contact with the justice system. They may have domestic family violence. They may have just other reasons why they're not earning much money. So they're not able to access a lot of the sort of more choice and privatised options in terms of health and social care. What I'm sort of anchoring on here is the social connection angle, because loneliness and social isolation happens across all of those other domains. People get marginalised, there's stigma, there's shame, and they don't come forward to accept the kinds of support that perhaps other people are accessing. Thank you. So actually loneliness has become part of much bigger conversation worldwide. You may have noticed yourself about ideas about the epidemic of loneliness, this sort of thing. And the World Health Organization has finally really positioned it front and centre. So they've got a commission at the moment on social connection, which aims to see this issue recognised and resourced as a public health priority. Now we're about halfway through the tenure of that commission, and they released this report at the end of last year, which is available on the link online, which really summarises all of the evidence around the detrimental impact of social isolation and loneliness for health, wellbeing, quality of life, and then all of the different types of programs and interventions that have been designed to address this problem. So some of those are individual things, like even therapy, but in my mind, the most interesting parts are the social and community embedded responses to isolation. Thinking about our area of the world, Australia, we have a very widely dispersed population. So people living in rural areas are actually lonelier on average than people living in the metro areas. Also, an estimated 10% of Australians live in outer regional and remote areas where there's pronounced isolation due to just sparse living situations, sparse assets and infrastructure. So that puts them at then an increased risk of actually being away from things that they'd like to be able to access. So I've written a chapter which is just coming out shortly with Leah Sharman, which is talking about loneliness in the Australian context and the fact that we really need to mobilise these community-based resources to enhance connectedness across communities, thriving communities. And I think there's a lot of wisdom in communities, and I'm not telling you guys anything that you don't know that we can actually bring to this issue. So that brings me to social prescribing. Social prescribing has been defined as a non-medical approach or health pathway in which patients are referred to social activities and social services in the community that improve their health and wellbeing through that mobilisation of community-based activities and people and resources. So this little photo that I found online is really to indicate the person with the interviewing board is a link worker or community connector person, and they're talking to a client who's been feeling isolated, and they're trying to get to know each other. And the key part about this conversation that is a bit of a contrast with the average conversation with a health worker or a GP is that they're not starting with what's the matter with you, tell me about your symptoms and we'll make a diagnosis and a treatment plan. They're saying what matters to you, what interests you, what could be available that might meet that need, either locally or perhaps online if there isn't anything locally. So it's a different quality of that information and engagement. So there are different models of social prescribing. These are the three sort of broad models. The light model is more like signposting. So this might be where GP, health professional, community worker will come into contact with a client who is obviously isolated. and they'll sort of know about, oh, there's a community garden down the road, or there's a choir in this hall, or there's, you know, a mothers and babies group over here, and they might signpost that or give them a brochure or some information about that. But that's pretty much the end of it. So when that happens, the problem is there's no follow through. So you don't know if they've actually gone to that thing and tried it out. They may not be back for another appointment within a certain time frame. So you don't really know how successful that model will be. That's probably the most things that people are doing at the moment. The medium sort of model is where a health facilitator would provide extra level of support, particularly around sort of engaging in health behaviours, but also might, you know, signpost voluntary or support groups, that sort of thing. Most of what I'm talking about for the rest of this little talk is the holistic or full model, where there's an actual dedicated person or a link worker, community connected person that is very much part of the overall social prescribing pathway. So how it looks in the UK model, which is probably the one that we know the most about and has been sort of established for the longest, is that the GP or primary health worker is referring their patient to the link worker. They'll have a number of discussions. They will find out what the needs and interests and barriers are. They will help to remove those. They'll find you know, community programs that suit that person's needs. They may even go with them to get them through the door. They will follow up. How did that go for you? Was that a good fit or not for you? Let's have another look. Let's go back. So there's a lot of follow-up and feedback going on in that holistic model. So this is an infographic that Leah Sharman did for one of our reports, which shows the adult version of a full model of social prescribing. So as I said, there's the lonely person, or someone's recognising they've got an isolated person. They make a referral to the link worker. They'll co-design a plan, a social plan together. They'll connect them to groups and services in the community, and they'll follow up. So there may be a number of different meetings over a period of time. So just a little quick word on referral sources. Again, because in the UK, everything was funded through the NHS, so it's a very primary care driven model. And all of those link workers were funded to sit within GP surgery. So it's a very medically driven sort of model. In Australia and in other jurisdictions, it's much more diverse. So actually we have referral pathways that are coming from community centres or from other community organisations. We also have a lot of self-referrals, so people who actually find out about something online or in their community notice board, and they'll sort of say, I'm kind of interested, tell me more about this. We still, across the globe, have much more information in terms of evidence for adults who who are going through it themselves rather than for young people. So there was a real kind of missing group there of families, young people and adolescents who also had very high levels of loneliness, particularly with adolescents. So there really wasn't a lot known. We do know, however, that we need a different kind of model. Adolescents tend not to just rock up to a GP, for instance, if they're having problems. They'll go to a friend or online. So we needed to have something different for that different age groups. Okay, so just a little bit on the evidence, if it works and does it work here in our context. So this is some results from a 2-year trial of the Brisbane North PHN funded social prescribing trial. So this one, so PHNs, there's all of the PHN regions across Australia. They have a certain amount of discretionary funding where they decide in their area with all their GP practices, what are our key priorities that we want to do programs around. Brisbane North had a big key area about loneliness and social isolation and social prescribing, and we were brought in as contracts with evaluation. So this is led by Leah Sharman on the left, and also with Natalie Jones in the middle, and myself. So this trial was operated through Footprints Community, and so they had the link workers, and they're still running. So their program brochure there is Social Health Connect. You can still find information about that online. And then we had training sessions with the link workers to tell them about the research and the evaluation, and they were collecting the data from their participants. So this isn't published in a scholarly journal yet, but the 2-year report is available and it's online. You can ask me if you can't find it. Just to sort of say how huge this region actually is. So if you can see the red outline, it's quite a large area to the sort of northwest of Brisbane. It goes out to Kilcoy and sort of farming land around there. It's also kombucha, and it goes across to Redcliffe and Bribie. So it's quite a large and sort of mixed area. If you can see the sort of flow infographic there, on the left-hand side is all the referrals. So people who were referred to the link workers as part of this social prescribing. And on the right is the people who actually accepted the referral. So sometimes the people referred didn't really understand what it was about. Sometimes they never answered the phone for the link worker, so they just weren't able to make the contact. But you can see overall the actual demographics are pretty similar in the two samples. So we've got a representative subsample that actually engaged with link workers. Just a few highlights there. We've got, a reasonably even split across male, female, obviously much fewer of non-binary. We've got a small minority of LGBTQIA+ identified folk. We've got a group of Indigenous folk. We've got some culturally diverse background participants. So in these tables, which I'm sorry are a little bit busy, on the left is the referral sources. So again, this just tells the story that these are not all coming from health or from GP or primary health. Even though this is a PHN funded trial, you would expect that a majority were coming from GPs. But what this is showing us is that a lot of them were actually coming from hospital discharge, so hospital and health services. A lot of them were self-referred, and a big group were coming from other community services. So that's where people are presenting. And those people, if they know, can send them through to Footprints to be involved in this kind of program. They're quite diverse. On the right-hand side, this is telling you about what are the barriers that stop people just going along to the community garden or the choir or the mums and babies club, because those things are already there in the community. So sort of it's a question about, well, why aren't people just going? Really big reasons why people don't go. So top of the reasons is mental health issues, physical health issues, but then all of those social determinants of health coming in. So financial stress. So even with a low cost thing where it's, $20 a time, that's going to put people off who have got a, low income. Unstable, intimate partner sort of relationship, having caring responsibilities where you can't bring your young person with you to whatever the program is. And then there's psychological barriers. So that we actually found in a few different trials. I haven't shown you the earlier trial, which was an adult trial in South East Queensland. One of the biggest barriers were not actually structural like transport and cost. It was, I know there's a group I can go to, I know how to get there on the bus, but I think people will judge me, I'm not walking through the door, I won't be like them. So those psychological barriers are really strong deterrents for people to go and just give it a go. And those are the very things that the link worker who's skilled can really help to overcome, just to get people in and feeling safe and comfortable. Cultural or religious reasons, language barriers, walking into a group that you're interested in, that is local, that you can get to, but you're the only Pacific person in the room. So we did have that sort of feedback. You have to feel that this is people like me. So lots of barriers to overcome. Thanks. But does it work? Absolutely, it works. And so this is just some selected outcomes from that 2-year report. On the first graph on the left, this is people's rated satisfaction with the biopsychosocial types of care. So physical health, psychological health and social all were far more or significantly more satisfied with those by exit of the trial. In the middle there, we've got the loneliness and social isolation, which also decreased significantly from pre to post. On the right-hand side, you've got different sorts of social factors. So readiness to join groups went up, trust in others went up. Pretty much everything except social support given, because it was already quite high at baseline, so there wasn't much change there. But everything else was sort of going from low to point by the end. So very promising results for the folk that didn't engage with that program. So that brings me to the current trial, the Queensland-wide trial for social prescribing for families and young people aged 0 to 18 years, and it's running through 10 neighbourhood and community centres all around Queensland. So this was funded from the state government Department of Families through the community service community centres. The contract research, so the contract went to Aspire, and then I'm leading the UQ team that's subcontracted to Aspire to do the evaluation protocol, so it's a little bit complicated. So what we've got at the top here is my attempts of doing digital art, which I probably need some Canva skills, but anyway. Basically what happened is that there was quite a long delay before we could start collecting any baseline data, partly because most people in those areas had never heard of social prescribing, they didn't know what a link worker was. So the link workers had to go out and about and form those trusted relationships with the stakeholders, the referrers first. So, you know, going out and talking to doctors and, you know, health professionals and teachers and early childhood educators and people in the community that offered these sorts of social activities, all of that had to be working first before anyone was going to, you know, send their clients across. And then there was the social prescribing piece. So you've got all the people being referred from all the different angles into the community service, talking a number of times with the link worker, developing a plan. It may be more than one member of the same family. It might just be the parents bringing their school-age child. Could be a teenager brings themselves. So a whole range of different sort of conversations there. And then they're working together to find a community group that's going to be inclusive and supportive and engaging for them, which could be a whole range of different types of things. Thank you. So we're only 7 months into this trial, so I actually don't have lots of results to show you, but I've got learnings early. So these are some of the things that the young ones were saying about themselves. So here we've got a 10-year-old girl who says, I'm nervous about meeting new people and trying new things. We had a lot of that kind of comment at the pre-baseline. 11-year-old boy saying, I'm nervous that my friends will leave school. You know, so if you're that kid that's got the one or two friends, you just don't want to leave, you know. On the right-hand side, you've got some more structural sort of barriers here. So 11-year-old girl saying, I live in a small neighbourhood, there are no kids my age near us. Or a 10-year-old girl saying, I live around elderly couples, there are not many kids or playgrounds here. So where would you gather to just incidentally run into other kids your age? So it's a bit of both. In terms of the early interviews with link workers, people saying what kind of social program they'd be interested in, social activity they'd be interested in joining. Interesting that the biggest chunk were interested in some kind of social emotional wellbeing program, which is a reflection on the fact that we've got a really big engagement from First Nations family in this trial. We've got a fair chunk who are interested in doing some kind of musical arts or culture type group. We've got a reasonable chunk who want to do some parent and child groups. We've got a reasonable chunk who want to do something more physical activity, leisure, outdoor activities. And then a smaller group that want to do something in nature. So again, this is very early data and it may well shift because we've got a fair way to go, but it just gives you a flavour of what people are thinking about. The methods are quite complicated here. So we've got lots of different types of data coming in. We've got the link workers implementation level data. So there's a line in their worksheet for every person that's presenting, just so we can get all those social equity and demographic kind of details at the family level. Then we've got self-reported surveys, so pre and 12 weeks and 6 months. And this is only, of course, for the people who consented to be part of the research, so that's a subgroup. We've got health economic analysis going on, so we've also got costings both from the government that are funding, you know, the positions and the resourcing, and we've also got some of those quality of life measures that can have values attached to them. And then we've got a qualitative component where people are telling their stories, and then we'll be looking at qualitative methods for that. So quite a lot of data coming at us, and we're trying to sort through that and make sense of that at the moment. So some of the challenges that we already can sort of reflect on is that first part that I said, it took a really long time, much longer than we expected for any data to flow, because of the lack of social infrastructure and understanding and promotion of the idea of social prescribing in a lot of those places. Also, these link workers were newly employed for this trial. So even the link workers themselves, and I've done some of their interviews, have said, I had no clue what it was. So I had to look it up before I applied for the job. So even they are starting from a fairly, you know, starting point. Then lack of that social infrastructure, those trusted relationships with other providers in the area. So if you turn up in an area with a chunk of money from the government, other people in the area are going to go, well, why did we get that money? Why would I send my people to you? Are you going to walk off with my people? So you've got to really kind of be clear about, you're not treading on toes. This is my role. This is how I can help you do your role, etc. There may be fewer free community things in those areas. So there may be lots of great things in the area, but there might all be like, the music teacher who has their studio, or the class that does this, or the gym, but you have to pay for those. So if you're looking for those low cost or free activities that people can access, you have to be sort of quite creative to find those opportunities. We're also trying to link in with existing programs in those rural and regional areas. So Arts Queensland have funded a number of those regional sort of programs. The Play on Sports vouchers that are also funded. Health and Wellbeing Queensland have community wellbeing grants. So it's hard to find, there's no central repository of these things. So the link workers have actually got to dig out, is there something in my area, where do I find those people? And you've mentioned local council will have a lot of things. If there's a local library, you're winning. So there's hubs that you look for that are running different programs. Okay, as a research evaluator, it's also really strenuous because we didn't have any researchers on the ground. We had link workers and we were trying to train the link workers to be researchers, and I don't think any of them had a research background. So for them, it's all red tape. It's all just a lot of admin they have to do, and we're particularly happy about it. So we had to get them engaged with, this is a trial. We need to have evidence, and you're a really important part of that evidence growing. The other part was a lot of the self-reported survey data was coming into an online Qualtrics software system, which of course means that once they've sent the link to their participant, they don't know if they've completed or not, because we can see it, but they can't see it. So a lot of that having to feed back a lot of information gets quite busy with the 10 sites. The other thing is that we've got all these different age groups that are involved in this trial. So you've got really different measures and methods that you can use with the young ones. So it's going to be parent proxy report for the 2 to 7-year-olds. Then you've got the primary school age who've got some child versions of things to report. And then you've got your youth and adults who can self-report. But then you can't merge that data because they're all different. So all of that's quite challenging. All right. Successes and lessons learned. Well, the link workers have been tremendous. So they've done a number of different community of practice sort of meetings and workshops, and they've come to Brisbane for a few of those. They've been really creative about trying to find bespoke things that are going to be helpful to the person that's saying, well, I'm really interested in Dungeons and Dragons or whatever it is. Okay, great. The early data, and as I say, I haven't got hard numbers yet for you because we're still getting that interim report out, but we are seeing that it's reaching the people who most need it. So we've got people here who've got all of the equity kind of backgrounds. They've definitely got elevated loneliness. They've got low community inclusion. They're experiencing multiple social determinants of health. So it's great news because we are actually reaching those people who often don't come to, GPs and other sort of services. And just sort of one quick dot point that the preliminary baseline to 12-week results are looking really positive. And as I say, the interim report is due in mid-March, so I'll be able to sort of speak more publicly about that in a little while. One thing I'd like to say about all of the social prescribing projects that I've been involved with is that it's not a program, it's not a thing. It's very complex and sort of bespoke, not a one-size-fits-all, which makes it quite hard to summarise and to show the evidence because each person's doing it for different lengths of time and different types of things. But it is highly relational. So this is a paper that was published out of the earlier South East Queensland trial, which really looked at the relationships that were built between the service providers in their community, and then between the link workers and the incoming client, and then the clients within the activity group and the facilitator of the activity group. All of those things were highly predictive of outcomes. So you've got to have those trusted relationships in place for the person to stick, if you like, with that community group, where now they're going to have a whole lot of resources, psychosocial resources open to them. Yeah, and so a little bit more about why we think the groups are important as opposed to, say, doing an individual online thing about, lonely thoughts or something. So I work with a number of social psych people who are using this social identity framework. So it has come from an intergroup perspective. It's been used in sort of big scale, when people are at war with each other, all the way through to workplace teams. And now we're looking at it in the health and wellbeing sort of context. According to this theory, and there's lots and lots of evidence around it, if you embed yourself in a group or community and you really start to identify with that community, so we might say, we're academics, say, so that's a social identity that comes with being part of this community, then you start to be able to take on board the behaviours and attitudes and values of that group, and you espouse those yourself. So putting that into a health context, if you join a group and you feel really strongly identified with that group, and the group norm is to be really heavy drug users or something like that, you're much more likely to take on that behaviour because it's normative within your group. Similar, if you're trying to change that behaviour, you need to actually think about your social connections and the groups that you've identified with. So you can use that idea as part of your intervention. So with this sort of thing, and with some of the previous arts-based groups, so choir and health and wellbeing sort of groups, to the extent that you have been a person who primarily sees yourself as, say, a person with schizophrenia, and you go and join the upbeat arts choir, and now you see yourself as a tenor, that's a really different identity that you're working with, and you've got this group around you that expect you to show up because you've got to hold that tenor line, and they're going to look for you if you don't come for a few weeks. And you've got to actually keep yourself fit, and you've got to be out of bed, and you've got to be prepared, and you've got your lung health and your posture and all of those things. They're kind of surreptitious health benefits of being a member of this trusted group. So it's quite an interesting sort of idea of how we can do health through an arts or through, some other non-clinical pathway. So for me, it's all about the group and community. I think that might be okay. Where to from here? So if we find that this current Queensland-wide trial is successful and represents good value in terms of the economic analysis, it will then hopefully support the wider rollout through other, because there's 170 odd community centres around Queensland. This is only in 10 of them. It will really provide much needed evidence for the family and child and youth sort of end of the age span, because so far most of the work has been done with adults. It will also provide evidence for people who live out of the metropolitan area and who are not from the weird background, so people who are culturally diverse and First Nations. So we don't know much about them at the moment. It will address this loneliness and social isolation, which, as I say, has been really platformed as a major public health priority, and it will hopefully relieve some pressure on mental health services in regional and rural Queensland, which is all in the media. I actually think that if we think the answer to mental health crisis is more one-on-one psychology services, then we're never going to get there. And there's a lot of other ways of doing mental health. So I think we really need to open it up to thinking about these amazing assets in the community that we can really harness to this. So that's it from me. Thank you so much again for the invitation, and I'd really love to have questions and discussion.
Maybe if people do have questions, if you want to raise a hand in the room or raise a hand online, and I can see they're already hands, so I don't have to jump in first with questions. So what would you like to do? Would you like to chair?
In the chat already from Jay.
Yeah.
Okay. I'll stand if it's easier.
Well, you can grab that chair if you want to sit down, Genevieve.
Yeah. It's a bit more relaxed. It's a chair on wheels. Yeah. Okay, so we might start with Andrew, and then if we jump to Jay's comment online, and then to Corey, and then I'll go for the next three after that.
I've just got a really basic, probably very simple question. So on your pie chart, you have the social emotional well-being activity. Can you just give me a sense of how that differs from like an arts and culture or like the other kinds of activity?
Yeah,
like, what does that consist of?
The quick answer is I don't know, because I haven't had a chance to really unpack what is actually happening in these programs on the ground yet. So we're not collecting a lot of data at the group, individual, the group activity level. So I'd have to go back to those link workers and say, well, what was in that program? What were they actually doing? But my understanding is that that would be a First Nations led sort of empowerment program of some sort, which may well have elements of those other things, nature and arts and sort of activity. So, but it might be more important to them that it's First Nations led.
Yeah, or the well-being is foregrounded as the purpose of the activity
Yeah.
rather than being a
About art, skill. Yeah, that's right. Exactly.
We had a lovely comment from Jay. Jay, did you want to speak for your comment?
Hello. Thank you very much, Genevieve. That was a really good talk. And I just wanted to say, from a personal perspective, recovering from burnout, it was strange to have my GP write on a prescription pad 2 weeks in a rainforest, get a puppy and go on a park run. But I drew the line at park run, so I got 2 dogs instead and joined the local puppy obedience school. So my original PhD work was in spiritual health and well-being, and I can see as a dimension of health, the spiritual health, that holistic way of looking at human beings in their social context it's beautiful work.
Yeah, and as a health person, it takes you back to your roots, really, because in the age of managed care, and you've got 8 minutes with the person or 50 minutes with the person, and you've got to build them with these numbers, it really does dehumanize that sort of process a lot. Just on that though, sometimes we've had feedback, and there's certainly feedback in the research, that being given a prescription for a social thing, if you're not ready for it, you don't understand it, can be seen as a bit of a get out of my waiting room sort of attempt. So I think it has to be messaged really well. And there is so the Royal College of GPs has a social prescribing special interest group. So there's more and more GPs going to these conferences, finding out about the evidence, understanding how do I pitch this so that my patient won't feel like I'm not listening. Because a lot of people go to the GP still expecting to get tablets, let's face it. So being said to get a puppy might not quite fit what their expectations are. Yeah. So it's all about
a very big rapport. Yeah, it was the relationship with my GP over a very long period of time before she.
And so the trust was there, and I think that makes such a difference.
Yeah, good, excellent work. Thank you very much for sharing it with us.
Thank you. Sorry, Corey was next, and then Linda.
Thanks, Genevieve. Yeah, jam-packed with lots of information there. Thank you so much. And a lot that I'll share on with a regional engagement committee that we have, that a couple of members actually initiated an end loneliness project. So they'll be very interested in that.
And are you in Rocky? Or
yes, yeah.
So one of our most active link workers is in Yeppoon. So if that's not too far, I mean, I've been up there myself, but in that region, and if it's child and family, obviously, that Jamie at Yeppoon is fantastic. So
no, that's great. That's good to know. Definitely.
And also similarly, someone mentioned Razin before. Topology have done a lot of work with Razin, so it's a music group that does a lot of community and up north, out west. They've just been last week, I think, to Emu Park, which is where the singing ship is, and so they're doing community consultation around some sort of community music making around the story of the singing ship. So there's things that people can get involved in that region if that's their interest.
Sure. So I just have a question though as well. You were talking around how, particularly in the UK, the link workers come from a very much health perspective, which is understandable, the funding bodies there and that. Have you found there was any sort of interaction with the social pedagogy practitioners who come from more of that social work sort of perspective? Is that crossover? Because I can see a lot of the
so my understanding is that people doing, so they've sort of devolved into lots of different roles. So some are link worker roles, some are more health coach type roles where they're doing perhaps more motivational interviewing around health behaviours. And then there's more social care type roles, which, a social worker could actually be in any of those roles. Community development sort of training is obviously a huge bonus for this sort of thing. If you're coming from a registered health background, the community development work is quite new, so people feel a little bit like, giving, we're allowed to go and just out there and talk to people with so, you know, I think everyone comes with their different skill set and their different sorts of training and qualifications, and it's a great mixing pot. I've had a number of conversations or presentations where people have said, well, shouldn't we be training people and having, you know, standards of this and that, whatever? And kind of yes, but at the same time, I would be really reluctant to have this become another health regulated thing, because we've already got a shortage of health regulated people out there. And honestly, it's a relational thing. If you've got someone who understands their community and has good relationship skills, they can be trained to be a link worker. I don't think you need to be a qualified psychologist, social worker to do that job. And in fact, those people are needed in their job. So that would be my kind of thoughts, that there can be better support and training for sure. And there's a lot of people who are developing modular type of training. So Take Queensland's got some, Aspire have got some. There's other groups that have got some, and there's of course the National Academy of Social Prescribing in the UK. Have got a lot of free online training for link workers, but yeah, I don't think we want to over-regulate that workforce, because they need to be grounded in communities. I don't know, I think I went off on my own soapbox there.
If we could go to Linda, and then we've got a question too from Kate from Marshall Online. Linda.
Oh, I was going to ask where the 10 sites were, but I remembered you had the map there. But
oh no, so the map was the Brisbane North.
Oh,
and the
sorry,
10
so where were the
sites-
10 sites?
Okay, so let me try and remember them all. So starting in the southeast corner, we've got Oxenford, we've got Inala, we've got going up the coast, we've got Deception Bay, Yeppoon, Mareeba, Wilson Heights outside Toowoomba, Blackburn. So there's 10. I can send an email.
yeah, no, I've been working with, I'm on the leadership group with Gladstone Region in Action Together. So it's a Stronger Places, Stronger People project. I don't know if you've heard of it, they're all around. Australia, but I was just thinking how this really links in with the work that they're trying to do in communities.
And there's lots of sort of initiatives and community-led things, and there's also lots of community centres that are not part of this trial, obviously, because they've started off through a different pathway for adults. So I think if you're on the Department of Communities website and you look up social prescribing, you'll see, you know, there's a big list there, and 10 of them are these, but there's lots of other ones.
Yeah.
But then local councils, other groups that also
Yeah, I don't know that they have these link workers that you're talking about, which is they're
Well,
spending a lot of money on.
You need the injection of funding to fund the link work, and unfortunately, in every project I've evaluated, it's always been short term. You know, it's like it's a trial, so you've got 18 months or 2 years, which is not great for anyone's job. You know, to sort of go, I'm going to put all this stuff, you know, get it all going from the ground up, and then I may not have a job next year. So it's short-termism is always a bit of an issue.
Yeah, the Gladstone Region Together's 10 years. Project. It's 10 million, I think, 10 years. And I don't know exactly what there's. I mean, they've got a lot of staff linking people, but they're not doing all of this. So
right, okay,
it'd be good to take this back.
And like talk.
For sure. That'd be great. Thank you.
We'll jump to Caitlin, so Jay can be relieved of her giant screen status.
Jay wants to get off the big screen.
Okay, Caitlin.
Hey Genevieve, nice to see you. It was lovely to hear more about your work. I'm curious whether, you know, we're very focused on our students and hear all the time that loneliness and social isolation is a big issue. Identity, we've just been reading the Respect at Uni report that's just come out. Have you come across an implementation of social prescribing in a university setting where it's been?
Yeah, so I mean, it's an obvious thing for me to do, because I've got this whole stuff going on about uni student mental health and wellbeing, and this whole other stuff going on about social prescribing. I've never managed to get the two to work together, but there is a group called I think it's SPOC, Social Prescribing on Campus, and it's led by Ruth Ann Baxter, who I met in Edinburgh. She's fantastic. So she's been doing small scale things at the University of Edinburgh, and it's just grown and grown. So now it's an online community of practice around social prescribing on campus. I think they have webinars, so if you can't find it, just message me because it's a really good one to get involved with. I've got a student at Nottingham Trent who's looking at international students in Britain being really lonely and socially isolated, and she's just done an intervention study run through their global lounge, which is like their sort of international student hub, where it sort of was not exactly social prescribing, but really looking at community assets and things that they might be interested in. So it was sort of like a starter pack where they did a workshop rather than have like an ongoing link worker, but it was similar sorts of ideas. So little trials going on, because you're quite right that a lot of students, particularly students who are doing blended or online learning, are really feeling quite isolated, even if they've got, you know, the best lecturers in the world and the best systems. They still don't have someone next to them to go, hey, am I doing this right, or do you want to have a coffee?
Yeah. And as you said, you know, that pathway into something like counselling or therapeutic support, there's just a vast number of students that will never take that path. So it seems
by the time they put their hand up for it, they've got 6 weeks to wait, you know, because everyone's trying to access at the same time. So yeah, there's a lot of things, a lot of sort of pressure points in there. And the other sort of backstory to that is that loneliness is not a diagnosis, you know, it's a human condition, and people can have it when they're in transition. I had it myself as an international student overseas, and I think that normalising that and just giving people better avenues to find their tribe, you know, they don't all need to go and see the counsellor. It's not really that. So,
Thank you.
Thanks for your question.
I'm just looking for any more hands.
Anna's not the pharmacist online. She's our she's our Mind Waves manager. She's in Glasgow, and she's actually in Brisbane today. I didn't know if Anna wanted to.
Did you have a question, Anna?
Or any comments, Anna?
No, is that you, Linda? Thank you for that. No, I was just thinking along the same lines as Caitlin around social prescribing in universities. So I've written down SPOC to look up, and I think at CQU we've got our student Mindwave connectors, who are our peer-to-peer student mental health and wellbeing advocates, and so I'm imagining them almost as that linking agent for our students, our self-referral pathways.
If you can get the peers to do the linking, it's going to be 100% more successful. So my little avenue there is that we started up a choir for international students after the flights opened after the pandemic. So it's called UQ Voices. We've got an Instagram page. We only had funding for 2 years. We're still going because no one wants to stop. I think we're in our 5th year. It's always a battle for funding because you've got to pay your arts people, your music people, but I think when you've got a project like that where everyone's really invested and everyone's getting the wellbeing benefits, it just sort of keeps going. So that would be one idea, but of course choir's not for everyone. There's all sorts of other things that people could be referred into. And campuses often do have a huge number of social activities, but students often think, oh, if I didn't join during O Week, I can't join till next year. They don't understand that the door is open and that they should just give it a go.
And of course, in our context, you know, online students, it's another layer, isn't it, too?
Where do we meet if we're physically
dispersed? And we're also struggling with that, or considering that in terms of just, you know, fast-through relationships, and that's another layer.
Yeah.
Okay, so can we jump in? I've got 3 questions. I really want to jump in with a quick question, and then Andrew had one, and then we'll hear from Margaret to wrap. My question was, with link workers, finding and establishing these link workers in the communities that you're doing the research in, how did you call for them? Where do they come from, and what happens to them at the end of the project?
Yeah, great 3 questions. So I need to just sort of say my role in this is very restricted to being the evaluation person. So the people who did the advertising and the, you know, selection process and the support is Department of Families, as well as to some extent Aspire, who's doing some training and support. So my understanding is that they are quite a diverse group, different types of backgrounds. And I know from the earlier project, South East Queensland project, the link workers that were in Ways to Wellness, for instance, they mainly came from social work, community development backgrounds. In this one, as I said, very diverse. One person's got a master's in architecture and urban planning, so all the way through to, I think there was people who had done, youth work backgrounds, justice, child safety backgrounds. So yeah, really quite diverse. What happens to them after? I actually don't know the answer to that. We hope that we get more funding and they keep going, but I suppose it all hinges on, what does the government think of the findings? So who's got the money for the next time?
Yeah, I mean, that just comes from a conversation we've been having over the last few days about, research projects that are very community and socially based, and what happens, one, to the outputs when the project's finished, and two, to what's happened in the community
Exactly.
when the research funding is gone. So thanks for pondering that. Andrew.
So I've got a question about the way kind of community activity is defined here. So these communities are place-based community, like it's in-person things, or are there also?
Well, as I said, I haven't had time to dig into all of the different types of programs, but my understanding is most of them are face-to-face in place. So it might be mums and kids going fishing would be one of them, or face painting in the actual community centre or something like that. I don't know of any digital ones, but that's not to say that they aren't happening. I just don't have that information.
Do you just as I know you won't be able to conclusively answer this, but do you have an instinctual response to whether there is a some kind of any kind of difference in the kind of outcomes if you have a digital
this is a totally different project that we ran during the first wave, 2020, first wave of COVID, because all the projects we were going to do in person had to stop. And it was like a big international online survey called Missing My Groups During COVID. And then my student and I analysed the music related groups, there were sorts of other groups. And so we mainly had sort of choirs, instrumental, bands, orchestras and dance groups in there, and we got people to reflect on how much they identify as a member of their group when they were meeting face-to-face versus in some kind of virtual form. And the identity was still high, but it was less high, so a significant drop. And then all of the psychosocial benefits from the group, so everything from things like self-esteem and feeling in autonomy and being able to give and receive support from the group and sort of help emotional regulation, all those sorts of things that you get from being a member of a group. They were also still quite high, so there wasn't a huge difference, but people definitely did say, I can't wait to get back together. So there definitely was a little bit of a difference for them, even if they were still continuing online. Yeah.
Margaret.
Okay, thanks, Genevieve. Really very interesting work and highly relevant. You can tell from everyone's comments. My question is really about, in terms of the referrals and the people that you're working with, your average age was about 59 in that original
Brisbane
one.
North,
Do you have a particular focus as well on sort of aged care? The reason why is my mother has moved from Cattle Station to Emu Park.
Right.
She just had an aged care assessment recently, and one of the questions was, do you feel lonely? It was very interesting from the assessor, and mum's not for the faint-hearted, and she just says yes, so she's got people around her now. She lives in a town now, but she's lonely.
Yes.
And so I was, and I think that must be a real issue for a lot of people who are aged. She turned 92 yesterday.
Yeah.
So she's, elderly.
Yeah.
So I was just wondering if that's a focus in your work as well?
Well, definitely not in this current one, although we do have some grandparents who are bringing their kids along to things, but it's sort of older focus, not the focus of that particular project. Some of my colleagues have done a lot of work around social connection for older and retired adults. I've done one with a community choir in a retirement village, but that's sort of not my area of expertise. I come from sort of youth and young adults kind of background. There's quite a lot actually. So a lot of the publications have come out with older adults as the participants. And there's some really lovely stuff around arts and cultural participation. What else would there be? Yeah, I feel like there is quite a lot going on. There's a group at UQ, or they're collaborating, where they're trying to find whether a simple digital thing can help people to find activity, so be their own link work way, and then trying to overcome that digital divide. People sort of in their 70s and 80s feeling less confident, with the new app, that kind of thing. So there's definitely quite a lot of work going on. It's just not mine.
Yeah, because it's a growing demographic, of course.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Thank you.
And often in regional areas where, it might be cooler, something, so you move to the coast, but you might not know anyone. So it's not a number of people around you, it's not you can tell when you need help. And that kind of stuff.
Yeah, it's interesting. Thank you.
Is that everyone?
That is everyone. Thank you so much, Genevieve, for
Thank you.
answering all
Thank
of
you.
our questions.
Yeah, that was really lovely and meant so much, obviously, to so many people. And thank you to everybody online who's so we're supposed to be